Hey, y'all, we have a great episode coming up for you, but if you're listening and it's early in the morning and you need a little pick-me-up, we have a suggestion before we start. Before we let you into the goodness of the BT podcast out here, and if you need a pick-me-up, Aaron, what would you recommend for someone that's got the beans? I just like to say it. They got the beans. You know what I mean?
And yeah. Trench Coffee. So go check out trenchcoffeeco.com. Use our code ONESREADY at checkout. I prefer the Cowboy blend. It's got a crap ton of caffeine in it. By the time I get done drinking at least one cup of that coffee, I am actually ready to attack the day. It makes me talk more, which I understand everybody has an issue with, and I get that. But go to trenchcoffeeco.com. Use our code ONESREADY at checkout. Check out the many blends that they have, always fresh, always perfectly blended and shipped direct to you. You can also send a bag downrange if you'd so like to, or if you so choose. You can go ahead and buy one of their bags of coffee and send it downrange to a deployed team, which is awesome. Trench Coffee Co. is a veteran-owned company and veteran-owned and operated former combat controllers and current combat controllers. That's why we're talking about him here before this podcast with Mike Blout, BT. So go check out trenchcoffeeco.com. You can find him on Instagram as well for a whole bunch of Burt content. So shout out to the A10. Trenchcoffeeco.com. One's ready. And go check them out in case you need that coffee early in the morning.
Yeah. Once you're awake, though, you're getting your workout in, post workout, during workout. Like there are things I like to do to make sure that I'm getting the most out of myself, which is granted not that much. But if I want to maintain my hydration levels so that I can get maximum performance and have the variety of flavors, like I just can't say enough good things about this Ivy level hydration that Hoist has going on, plus the flavors. And then like Aaron and I disagree on powders versus liquids, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. I love the powders, man. I just got my monthly shipment of Hoist, the new powders. They got watermelon now and the powders. Forget it. It's my new favorite flavor. It's fantastic. Dude, I had one before we got on. It's my normal morning routine is I throw a Hoist in with my, early morning routine just to get ahead of my hydration for the day. Fantastic. I love the powders.
Yeah. Hydrate right now for later. That type of stuff. Whatever. I don't know. That's what they told me in basic training. I ignored them until today. But go ahead and check them out. Use the code ONESREADY, drinkhoist.com. They're fantastic people. They've been huge supporters of the project. Make sure you use the code, not only for your discount, but to let them know that you came from over here. And you won't regret it. I promise. We were all cynical about hydration. At least I was before. Huge believer now. And now we'll let you get into this podcast. I apologize in advance for the level of sarcasm that I start with in this one, but you'll get over it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the One's Ready podcast. You're in the team room with Aaron and our guest Mike today. Start out. Our guest Mike has already liked and subscribed to everything that we've ever put out, so you should follow his example. Get out there, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out a lot. And like I said, our guest name today is Mike. He is a former combat controller and one of the few men I actually have feelings for in this world. So I'll let him introduce himself. Mike, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, man?
That's a hard intro to follow up, man.
What an intro.
As Trent said, Mike Blout, 20-year combat controller, had a lot of experiences during that time. Me and Siegs were on team together a couple times, actually. Man, it was a privilege and an honor, brother. I look back on those times fondly. A lot of deployments. My last 5 years, I was fortunate to get into the AETC world. I say fortunate because it really kind of opened my eyes. I looked at team life as much as I loved it and wouldn't trade it for anything. It was very mission focused. And what I liked about moving into that different space was starting to widen my aperture of what's going on within the military complex, man, how it's moving, how decisions are made, kind of how the sausage is made. So it was really interesting. I was blessed and I was fortunate to go out to dive school where I worked as an instructor. And then I filled in as a superintendent for about a year and a half. That was an absolute blast until Hurricane Michael came by and gave us the business. Get that entire area of the business, man. Seriously, shout out and prayers to the folks over in Lynn Haven and in Panama City Beach. I know there's still parts of that town, Mexico Beach, they're still recovering, man. That was a massive, massive storm. Then after that, so I got humanitarian, moved out to Texas, where I did Stand-About for about a year, which was it was an experience. Stand-About was a good time. And then I went over to Special Warfare Prep, and I ran that for about a year. And I'm sure listeners of this know that Siegs was also very well tied into that, one of the plank holders. So I just tried to continue to carry the good work that him and his team had put down. We were very successful. I think we had some great young men and women coming through the program. really moving towards innovation being the wave of the future. And that's, I think, also another really interesting thing about being on the training side is being able to be at the nexus point of where innovation meets, man, just good old fashioned hard work, and seeing how you can mix those two to make the best possible product. So that's me in a nutshell, man. Really happy to be here. Really happy to have a conversation.
No. And then when you took over prep, it's fun note for everybody out there. Mike and I never disagreed on anything with the way that things should be run. We've always been 100% in lockstep, never disagreed. That's just the way our relationship goes, right?
Yeah, man. We didn't necessarily always agree, but we had some spirited whiteboard debates.
Yeah. So seriously though, like as one of the first people that was a supporter of this project, like vocally and openly, and saw the potential of what we were doing, Mike, you know our audience, like, so folks, like, chronologically speaking, why did you join the Air Force? Why did you want to be a combat controller? Yada yada yada. You obviously came from a big city, very metropolitan guy. Like, how'd you get into this rough and tumble business?
Oh man,
I can't wait to see the comments, because people are gonna be like, I don't know who this guy is. Trent, like, so far he subscribes to everything. He loves everything that we do. He's your best friend, and he comes from New York City, like downtown Times Square. That's what I know about Mike right now. I love it. This is how you walk the dog, Mike. I don't know if you know the podcast world, but Trent's really crushing it today.
Oh, he is, man. It's good. It's good. So no, I'm not a big city guy. From a small town in North Carolina. So my pathway to the military, wasn't doing great in high school. Honestly, never saw much of a point in it. It wasn't that I struggled academically. It's that I struggled with going to class. I don't know. I never felt like I was learning things that were going to benefit me in the future. And I think there always was something in the back of my mind that knew I wanted to serve. And it's funny, my mom, not too many years ago, had pulled out some pictures of like 4th or 3rd grade or something. It was a bunch of pictures of me drawing like little army men and airplanes and stuff like that. So even, in a time when I don't remember that great, I was still thinking on that track. So I joined right after 9/11, man. So I have a story pretty similar to other 9/11 babies. I was driving to college, a small little community college in Southern North Carolina, and not doing much of anything. Heard on the radio my 1990 Blazer, Bessie, amazing vehicle. Miss that girl to this day. Much respect. She's the junkyard.
Shout out.
I remember hearing over the news, the first plane hit the first tower, and I was like, "What the flip?" So I execute a pretty serious illegal U-turn, jump a median, go back to my apartment just in time to see the second plane hit the second towers. And there was some feelings, possibly some breakage of stuff in the apartment. I was pretty upset. My roommate was pretty upset. I called my dad and my mom, and I told them I'm going down to the recruiter. And so I did. So I went and talked to the recruiter. First, I talked to a Marine Corps recruiter. I grew up in Eastern North Carolina, so most of the stuff we had out there, man, was Marines. You had Cherry Point, you had Camp Lejeune. So that's where I was heavily influenced by. The older men that I looked up to in church were all Marines. So I go in there. I talked to them for a little bit. My father convinced me to have a conversation with the Air Force recruiter. So I went and talked to the Air Force recruiter. And I didn't go in there with high expectations, Ben, because I didn't really know much about the Air Force. It was never something I paid a lot of attention to. It just didn't heavily influence my life in the area where I was at. And I asked my recruiter, I said, is there any jobs that are ground combat oriented in the Air Force? Almost tongue in cheek, laughing a little bit because I didn't think there was. And she, funny enough, man, I'm not kidding, had a VHS shrink wrapped combat control on, tape on her desk. And I'm looking at it. And it's a bunch of guys carrying
3 doors
logs
down,
and
kryptonite in the background. Yeah, 100%. If I go crazy, well, they will call me Superman. And
Exactly.
People wear Gentex helmets. I know the video, my guy. You're speaking my language.
So she showed, or I never even watched the video. Funny enough, what got me was I said, "What's that?" And she says, "You don't want to do that. You'll never make it." And I was like, "That's it.
Hooked.
All right, this is what we're doing. Got it."
Wow. Got it.
How did this lady know my love language, man? Tell me I'm going to fail or I suck, and I'm absolutely going to do everything I can to prove you wrong.
How did you do that? I want to focus on something. We get this question a lot. You've mentioned it a couple times. How important, you talked about looking up to people in your church and using that part of community as a good foundation. I can already hear it in what you're saying. How important was your faith to you as you're making this decision moving into the military?
So I grew up in church, and I'll be honest, man, there's been plenty of times where, where's a good book would call it, I've been backslidden. And team life is crazy, and you live crazy, you live reckless. Man, it's almost like rewiring your brain at certain points especially when you're a younger man and you're out doing the job, man, the business part of the job. But I'll tell you, man, that's always something that was with me. I truly believe the reason I'm still here is for a couple reasons. One, God wasn't ready to bring me home. Two, my wife, who's been my absolute rock, and my kiddos, man. And then, so for me, it's God, family, country. And I will tell you, man, for a while, especially when I was younger, it wasn't that way. It was, it was red, white, and blue, patriotism, Lee Greenwood, the American eagle flying up the Statue of Liberty, eating apple pie.
Amen.
I've reprioritized and reshuffled.
Yeah. Right. So we get there, the recruiter does the exact same, the exact thing that she does. She knows what button to push with you. And she says, hey, you're never going to make it. And, don't even try this thing. How long did it take you to actually get in? Because your story and my story, it's going to be two sides of the same coin, right? I hear the exact same thing as a young man. I did
except for Ohio.
Well,
so
except for Mike is a legend in the career field, and I'm a POS that's just here on this podcast trying to get him to tell the story. But I think I was gone like 2 months later. I did the same thing. So, September, October timeframe, like I got through the DEP program. How long did it take you to get out of North Carolina and get down to San Antonio?
It was quick, man. It was a pretty quick turn. I would say somewhere like 5-6 weeks, something like that. It was a relatively quick turn, and I was able to actually go with a guy that I grew up with, which was cool, man. Because I really hadn't traveled a whole lot at this point. I was like most guys. Okay. I was a homebody. Yep. Eastern North Carolina was home. Really hadn't been much outside of that. So yeah, going to San Antonio was a big deal, man. I was worried about being homesick. I was worried about missing all my friends and my family and all that stuff. But yeah, it was a quick turn.
Okay. So then you show up to San Antonio. We got to get through basic training. Do you remember anything from your basic training? Because I just completely memory hold it because I was so focused on getting in, Doc.
Yeah, I was in a similar boat, man. Honestly, after the festivities of the first couple nights, I was trying to suss out who else was trying to go to selection. So once we started to figure that out, we got our little nucleus within our flight of who was going, and whenever we could, we were smashing additional PT. I'm talking Terminator 2, Sarah Connor PT, where you're flipping over beds and you're cranking out, out chin ups. You're doing resistance push ups with somebody pushing on your back. We're just in there doing jailhouse workouts.
Just bros being dudes trying to get ready for this thing that we call the indoctrination course. Well, for you guys, it was the orientation course back then. So you get through basic training, you get over, and it's that bus ride that you're leaving the soft confines. Do you remember what squadron you're in basic training?
320th, man, the Rock. Actually, they demoed my building.
Yeah, I was in the 321st. It's now like a storage building. Every time I would go back to, and it's actually the only reason I remember it is because later in life, we would go to Cafe de Jalisco, which is right outside that gate. But you could look at my former basic training squadron from that great hole in the wall Mexican joint. So for everybody from Cafe de Jalisco that listens to this podcast, shout out, your huevos rancheros are fantastic. So you show up to that, now the Chapman Annex, but back then it was Medina. You take that bus ride across. What was it like, those first couple of moments? Because again, you didn't know what combat control was. You didn't know that there were ground operators, and we're in a time of war. I distinctly remember everything when I went to Indoc the first time. Those moments are crystallized because it was serious business. Every instructor there would just look at you and be like, "Hey, this is not playing around time. This is serious business. Like, you guys are about to go do some stuff." And there was a weight to their words. What do you remember about that first time?
I think it's very good. That's a really good rundown of, I think, how anybody felt in that time. Man, none of us came into it with our eyes closed, but at the same time, we were young. We're, idealistic. We had ideas of, John Rambo and John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. I'm sure the super machismo that we grew up on. But really, what I came into it as humble as I could, man. And I think most guys, and I think that's one of the really cool things about Air Force Special Operations is, man, we have people that have just done amazing things. And man, we try to carry ourselves so humbly. And it was the same way in the pipe. I mean, you had some bluster and some trash talking, of course, when you're amongst your friends, but outwardly to the public, man, or to people that were outside of our circle, very quiet, very try to be as respectful as possible. Just try to do our job. When you talk about how I felt when I first got to Medina, I think backtracking just slightly, doing the pass test and basic was really interesting because that really kind of set the tone for what was coming up. And there's like 120 of us that tried out, and the number that actually made it past that initial gate of that pass test, man, was infinitesimally small. It was like
10 people,
15, 17 guys, something like that, made it past that gate, and it was the swim that killed everybody.
I mean, but that process continued, and I wanted to ask about that. As you talked about getting that nucleus of people in basic training, and then moving forward, like your nucleus had to change over time because you lost people just on that first test. And then, you get over to Chapman or Medina, you're going to start losing people again. Like, how did you deal with, some of the people that you'd grown close to, like in this short period of time, you'd had these experiences with, and then one day like they show up and they ring the bell or they get injured or whatever, and they're gone. Like, do you have any memories of how you overcame those issues and what you, how did you keep moving on when they didn't?
So I'll tell you, man, I think the military is brilliant in a lot of ways, even sometimes if it's unintentionally, because that in and of itself sets you up for the really hard part of our job, the business end of our job. And that's when we lose our brothers. But going through the pipe, and this is in no way trying to draw the parallel that they're the same, but there is some similarities there. You get close to somebody, you're friends with them, you're moving together, you're having all these shared experiences that are horrible, that are great, but man, regardless of what they are, they're building you tighter and tighter. And when they leave, man, there's a lot of feelings. There's hurt, there's possibly betrayal, there's who knows, man, the whole slew of emotions comes flying at you. As far as how you keep going, man, it's really simple. I could throw a lot of words at it, but I'll tell you, never quit. That was my mindset when I joined. We said it every day, 1,000 times a day. Who y'all never quit? Who y'all never quit? And I mean, it was dogmatic to a sense, but at the same time, man, you really ingrain that in your mind of, man, what is it that would make me quit? And you have to have in your head, man, it's when they drag me off this range cold and dead, and you better, poke me twice to make sure, because I might just get back up and keep going. And that was the mindset of the people that were successful, man. We weren't going to quit. It didn't matter. Freaking kill me, but I'm not stopping.
But what made that mindset, stick around throughout the entire? Because like some people show up and they say things like this, right? Like, and it's hard to suss out the difference between the doers and the talkers sometimes. So I'm wondering, like, was it something about the job, or did you also, like, were there cadre members that you looked up to, that you were like, I want to be like that guy, not the guy over here, but that guy, or were there like some of the retrainees, NCOs, or anything on your class that helped you through some of the rough times, or
man,
or was it just the job and just Mike Blout being Mike Blout?
No, it absolutely was not me, man. It took a village to raise this idiot. I tell you that right now. I've been so fortunate to have so many squared away NCOs around me. Man, a lot of great cadre. Man, it's hard to by name because I'd miss 15 people, and I don't want to do that. But yes, I absolutely had instructors that I looked up to and I respected a ton. The ones that I always gravitated to more were the guys who would share some of their experiences with us, even if just a taste, man. That downrange experience, man, we were like kids sitting in front of grandpa on the carpet, cross-legged and big-eyed, just tell me more, because we were hungry, man. We wanted that knowledge because we wanted to go out there and do God's work, do the business. As far as, man, people on team with me, I was really fortunate again, because at the time I was coming in, that was when there was a big migration from like the recon community and the Ranger community, and a lot of guys were cross-training over. So I got some really salty, squared away NCOs that I got to be on team with, man, that, like I said, I was a young, crazy kid. And, man, I'm just thankful that they took the time to smack me upside the head when I needed it, or pull me in for a hug when I needed it, and square me away and get me to go where I needed to go, man.
Yeah, no, I think we've all had that experience, right? Like, you're young, you're kind of all over the place, you're maybe not very emotionally mature, and there's that older guy that just knows how to, like, put you in the box that you need to be in and, like, move you on down the line. You know what I mean? Like, and it has to be someone you respect though. And I think that's like the foundation of most of our training and everything else that we do. So we are going to get the question if we don't ask it. What was the hardest part, physically, mentally, whatever? Just straight up. What did you? What was your big hurdle?
Of the pipeline or of the career?
The pipeline first.
Wow, biggest hurdle. Man, I would like to say it might sound silly too, man, because I was always really good in the water, but it was because I went to CDQC, I didn't go to Air Force Dive, so we still had to do the hands up tread. I couldn't egg beat, man. Could not egg beat, right? Which sucked.
Tail old as time.
Could not egg beat.
You hate to hear it.
I'm surrounded by all these people that are fantastic at it. They can hold like 75 pounds over their head and just egg beat like beasts.
Yeah.
Could not do it, man. I don't know what it was. Whatever way I spun on my legs, it didn't matter. It pulled me down.
Well, it's like having a ceiling fan. It's like in the summer, you're supposed to have it spin one way, and then it's the other way. You should have just went the other way.
I tried, bro. I tried all the ways. So I'm not kidding. I could hold my breath for days. I was really confident in the water, man. I was swim team 1 at dive school. I did well in that space, man. I felt more comfortable in the water most times than I felt on land. But I hated egg beating, man. That was my nemesis. That was my arch nemesis. So what I had to do was I would just literally frog kick and hold my breath. So just get the biggest breath I could to balloon up my lungs so I could keep my hands up. And at the time, I'm not going to call it any times, but it was a good long time holding it there, man. If you're doing it that way, basically what you're doing is you're hyperventilating yourself. And so the trick for me was I had about 2 minutes to 3 minutes where I could do that without going like completely cyanosis, my face going blue and passing out. So I had to get it done right the first time because if I pooched it and had to do it over again, I was probably going to go see the wizard.
Right. I love how this is the worst advice ever, by the way. So like usually we talk about getting really good and, having great technique. And you're like, no, I just refused to quit and I found a way to do it. And then I just tried harder and I figured it out. I love it.
No, the right answer is absolutely get with a swim coach. I mean, which the guys coming in nowadays have access to so much, man. And it's not to say we didn't have access to a great amount of stuff when we were going through as well. It's just different, a little bit different. But man, yeah, absolutely. Get with somebody who's sharp on that stuff. Ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. Man, coming from a guy who ran the preparatory course, man, as an instructor, we want to see young guys that are hungry to learn. I mean, you might catch a little bit of flack for asking a question in the wrong timing, et cetera. That's just part of the process, man. Ask the questions. You have professionals around you that are there to make you better. Utilize the resources you have available to you.
Yeah. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to get stronger because you asked a dumb question. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Dude, I always thought it was funny. I've heard that story, not your story, but like, I don't know how many people have said to me, like, I didn't use the egg beater the entire pipeline. Like I just manned up and just like kept my head above water. But then you'll see those same people as instructors screaming at students for not egg beating. But it's like, it makes sense because they understand how important it is. Yeah. Even though like, if you throw them in the water, they're probably still not going to do it very well, but they're just going to make it happen.
Yeah.
So I always love the dichotomy of that. One more thing about the pipeline for me. Was there ever a sense throughout the pipeline? Like what was there like a moment where you thought I might make it? Like that were like, like when it becomes routine and you start to like get that sense that you're going to make it no matter what, like for real, and that confidence really starts to grow. Was there a point in the pipeline that happened for you?
Never, man. I maintain that
struggle bus.
I maintain that Rocky 2 mindset. I never let myself go into the Rocky 3 mindset, where I'm getting protected and stuff's easy and I'm on an easy street, because I think that hunger, man, is what helps you stay successful. That desire to outperform your peers, your people to your left and right. Even if you guys are, man, 3/4 of the way through the pipe, for us at the time at AST, you're in Florida, you get to have your weekends, you're possibly living off post now. And you had to stay salty, you had to stay frosty, you had to keep your mind on the goal being, I'm going to put, I already got this beret, but I'm going to take this all the way to team, because it was never about just making it through the pipeline, man. And I think that was something, I don't want to say something necessarily unique about our generation, the guys who came in post 9/11, but we had the reality of we're going to war.
Immediately.
We knew right away what was at the end of the rainbow, man. So I never treated it like it was college or, we were just having fun. Man, we had some fun, don't get me wrong, but man, at the end of the rainbow, the idea was we're going to fight, man.
Right. We try to communicate that to everybody because, we are who we are, and we have our we got the Discord, we've got Reddit, we engage on a bunch of different platforms. And obviously, here we constantly try to pass on that experience. I think that's the correct way to say it. But people with us, they just get hyper focused on, I'm going to get this beret, I'm going to graduate the pipeline. Some are even focused on like, I'm just going to get through A&S. And we're like, hey, guys and girls, that ain't the end, man. Like the whole point is for you to get to team and then go down range. That's the point. Don't be so focused on, pipeline schools. Okay, great. Of course you want to graduate dive school first go. Of course you want to graduate free fall first go. Of course you want to go to the apprentice course and crush it and do a great job. Okay, got it. But the end state is going to team. So when you showed up, what STS did you go to first?
23rd, man. 23rd STS blue team.
Bam, blue team. Shout out. So blue team at the 2-3. So you get down to the gorgeous panhandle and you're the new guy on team and you're going down range. How did your mindset change? And how did you feel getting to the 2-3 and starting your training to get to deployment?
Oh, people that know me now would probably laugh, man, but I was excessively quiet. And it's because I was walking amongst people who had already been downrange, like initial push stuff, people that put in serious work, man. So I was quiet. I asked a lot of questions. I did everything I was asked to do as quickly as I possibly could because just because you were on team, man, did not mean that there was no consequences. If anything, it meant the consequences were more severe because it was, it's
going to go run them towers, baby. Hey, if you talk too much, like for everybody that doesn't know about the 2-3, there's a tower that is out back, and those stairs are well worn with the feet of people that ask dumb questions or said stupid things.
Amen to that. But it's good, man, because iron sharpens iron, and man, you're getting that tough love because you don't get a free pass to sit at the table. You got to earn it, man. You earn it every day, and it's not something you earn once and you keep forever and just rest on your laurels. It's something that you earn daily by your dedication, by your physicality, by your mental capabilities, by your desire to grind, man. And the great thing about the team atmosphere is, say you're having a bad day and you're dragging and you don't want to go PT or whatever, man, one of your boys is going to come by and they're going to pick you up and say, get your ass up, man, we're going to go PT. And that you're going to do the exact same thing for them on a day when they're not feeling it. Or, man, let's go out and do this training exercise. Or, man, we got free time. We can just let the guys go. Or we can stay here and train for 3 hours because that's what we're about. Man, I loved, and to this day, I will always treasure being around people that have that mindset. Man, we're here to grind. This is not a job. This is a lifestyle. We do this because we know what our next is all the time. We're in a constant state. I lived in a constant state like everybody else, like all of us, man, of we were deployment to deployment. That's what we were waiting on. And the next pump down range. So you didn't have time to chill. You didn't have time to take a breath because you were always of that mindset that somewhere, out there, my enemy's training. And if I'm taking it easy, they're going to get me on that day. And I can't let that happen.
Mm-hmm. That's right. How long did it take you before you got that first deployment?
It was 05, 06. So it was relatively soon after. It's pretty standard for a baby controller. It was an AZRT trip, but really we didn't have any AZRT stuff to do. So I ended up working the tower at Balad. And I'm not kidding you, boys. I've been shot at a lot, man. I was more stressed out in that daggone tower. When you have nothing against Russian Antonovs, but for those who don't know, it is a very large aircraft. And a lot of their people that were coming into Balad, they didn't speak English like at all.
No, and you're supposed to. Yeah, it's a fun thing about air traffic control. Like English is the international language of air traffic control. You're supposed to be able to speak English, and that's a level across the playing field worldwide. Yeah. But apparently, that's more of a guideline.
Yeah. Well, no. So they did speak English, but they only spoke like 3 phrases, and that was clear to land, clear to take off.
Nice.
Go around. That was it, man. Yeah. And if you said anything like in the phase of flight where they should be landing, and it was other than those 3 phrases, they just interpreted as what they're supposed to do. So yeah, I had a lot of them come. Oh man, it was nuts. And you had helicopters that would just take off and do their own thing. It was a growing experience. Let's put it like that, man. I definitely felt like I had earned something when I got out of there.
Yeah. And that's a funny thing that you bring up too. Like you would train your entire life, like from, Eastern North Carolina to going through your entire pipeline, getting through AST. You probably thought, okay, I'm going to go down range. I'm going to be a JTAC. I'm going to attach to a team. I'm going to do that direct action mission. And here you are in a tower doing air traffic control stuff. And you found that was even more stressful than you thought the JTAC stuff would be. Like, how did that, and you said it was a growing experience, but how did that sort of shape you as you got back from that first deployment and got ready to go on the next 2, 3, 4, 5 deployments that you had? How did that help you grow as a controller?
Let me know that we're not a one-trick pony, man. And I think that's a really great thing about the Air Force community, the Air Force Special Operations community, is we don't necessarily specialize. We have things that we might be better at than others. But man, we're very much so a Swiss Army knife. We bring a lot of capacity, a lot of capabilities, and that's because we're such a small community. We attach to basically everybody. And if we're going to attach to a team, we have to be able to employ the way they do. We have to be able to fill the gaps that they have within their structure. Otherwise, we're not relevant. So we trained in a broad scope of skills, and we had to maintain proficiency in all those skill sets, which is why I always tell people, they're like, man, why is your guys' pipeline so long? And I'm like, man, because we go over a lot of stuff. There's a lot of opportunities you get as a young Air Force Special Operations guy that, quite frankly, people re-enlist for in other branches.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah. To get all that's a great point that you bring up there. And I want to highlight it. The schools that we go to, the schools that we're going to give you in your pipeline, the opportunities that we're going to give you right out the gate, just for saying, I'll try, just for raising your hand and getting through assessment selection, we are going to give you things that 10-year Army veterans with combat deployments re-enlist to go do. No kidding. That's the benefit. They're like, hey, we'll let you go to free fall school if you re-enlist for another 6 years. And they're like, sign me up, baby. 6 more years, free fall school, worth it. And we're going to give it to you right out the gate.
Yeah.
Well, it's the whole earning stuff. You know what I mean? Like if you force someone to do anything, the odds are they're going to complain about it. Like, oh my goodness, I have to go to this school. Right. And it's hard to get that broader experience. And it's funny. I had a similar experience doing like a 160th support, Mike, right? Like I'm not out there running and gunning, but like all I'm doing is doing weather nerd stuff for these pilots that are crazy and are out every single night. And people are like, how is that more stressful than being out with a team? I'm like, dude, like these guys every single night, and I have to be there the whole time. And I'm sitting in front of these stupid screens, and they're yelling at me if I get anything wrong. There's dudes like, it was 2 degrees warmer than you said it was going to be. I'm like, I'm sorry, man. I don't know what's going on.
I said plus or minus 5.
Oh, gosh, dang.
We all know that weather forecasting is essentially astrology with numbers attached to it. Hashtag defund the weatherman. Shout out to Dan Holloway.
Thanks, Dan. That's hurtful. Anyway, I just wanted to throw it out there. So move like. But like I do think it gave you a broader, like you're a pretty open-minded guy, and I think it kind of started from your first rotation, being able to see the bigger picture. I'm not saying that there are combat controllers I met throughout my career that were like, if you're not a JTAC, then what are you? You know what I mean? Like we're the most important thing in the world. But you did end up getting that JTAC rating and doing at least a few more rotations. If you could kind of talk about, what it's like coming back from the first one, and then like essentially your pipeline doesn't end. There's always more things you need to learn, more qualifications, more that you can do to get out there to the fight and make a difference.
So, came back and just got back on the training paying train. And man, for those who don't know, you're gone quite a bit, especially early years. And that's just something that you sign up for. I would give a word of caution to those who are married, who have kids, etc. Not a word of caution as in don't do it. Just that's something that it's not just you signing up for, your family signing up for that, and have that conversation, man, because it is absolutely going to take a team to make it through that process. It is not easy. When I came back from that first trip, man, I'll never forget. My oldest son, who's now 18, Jesus, I'm getting old. I know, dude, it blows me away. He was 2. Coming up on 3, and he literally hid behind his mom's leg because he didn't know who I was. Because this is back in the time where we didn't have VTC. You had a sat phone out at the fob. That's about it, man.
Dude, you were going down range with a handful of cards from the USO that were like calling cards. Like that was one of I distinctly remember from my first couple deployments, is no kidding. Like I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Like I honestly thought I made it. I went to North Carolina, did the train up for a task force rotation, and the chaplain walked around and he handed me a stack that was like this big. And he's like, hey man, free calling cards. You guys are going to be able to call home whenever you want. And that's what we did. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, these guys got this deployment thing figured out. You know, I'll hit the next 5 Christmas trips in a row. No big deal. Cause you know, we really got hooked up, but yeah, it was just a wild time. So I have heard, you know, people talking about this. Can you talk about, you know, kind of the feeling of you're never really gone and you're never really home, and you know, for your family. And you already talked about living deployment to deployment, and you know, I think, you know, Fred over at Count and Coup Tactical said it really, really well. Is, you know, you get into that grind of, I'm going to go downrange, I'm going to go do these good things, I'm going to go, you know, you're a patriot, man, you're, you know, God, country, family. Like I hear all those things as you talk them. Did you ever go too far in the direction of, you know, all you're thinking about at home is that next deployment? And then even when you're deployed, you kind of miss home, but you feel better deployed. You feel like you're more in your skin. I had the distinct feeling a couple times of just feeling not even comfortable stateside and just thinking about, okay, well, I'm deploying in 4 months. I know for sure I'm deploying in 4 months, and I'm going to do the best I can here for a couple months waiting. But really all I'm thinking about is going downrange that next time.
No, you're 100% right, bro. The grind is something that takes over your life. It becomes, it's like anything, man. It can be addictive. You start off, man, idolizing this thing and wanting to get to it. Then you get to it and you start to do it and you are successful at it, or you do well at it, or it strikes the core because you're an adrenaline junkie, or man, you never feel more in tune with yourself than when you have a gun in your hand and the world's on fire and you got 14 aircraft over here and you got, you know, 4 different maneuver elements that are trying to shoot you, and your team's, you know, blowing up your intercom or your inner team. Some people lose their mind in that space, man, but I think a very small fraction, man, find a level of clarity in those moments that don't exist anywhere else. So to answer your question in short, yes, man, I 100%, the first half of my career, if not a little bit more, was living deployment to deployment. 300 plus days a year gone, especially overseas. When I was out in Oki, the JSET pain train, my wife and I were just talking about it this morning. I would literally come home, put my bag down by the door because I was home for a day, maybe a day and a half, take out the stuff I needed washed, wash it, keep the rest of the stuff in there. I didn't even unpack it, repack it, back out the door.
Yep.
And at the time, you know, you're looking at it through the lens of a young 20-something. This is my job. This is what I got to do. And you got mom at home that's soldiering and doing her thing. But what you don't realize, and you don't start to realize till you get older, is how hard it is for that back home, and how much, you know, your significant other shielded you from to keep that off your plate so you could concentrate on doing what you had to do and coming back home. Yeah, man, I was absolutely addicted to the grind. I loved it. I love being downrange. I went through a lot of soul searching to get to a place where I was comfortable being stateside and, you know, not sleeping with an M4 beside my bed or a pistol under my pillow.
Well, I think it's the immediacy of the situation when you're deployed, right? Like you said, you don't really like doing busy work at school, but you like learning, you like problem solving, right? And this is how my brain does it. Like deployed problem solving is like, it's very immediate with immediate results and very immediate consequences if you don't get it right for you and for all the folks around you. And you come home and everything is like the long game, 30-meter targets, whatever, you know, like things that are not. And so it's hard for people to understand. I think sometimes when you're like, that's not even a big deal. Why are we so concerned about this thing? No one is going to die because I didn't put my shoes in the closet. You know what I mean? Or like,
it's like Fight Club, right? When he's sitting at the table and he's like, you know, when you've been in a fight, the rest of the volume of your life gets turned down. And I exactly the same thing you said, Trent. You get home and people start talking about these at-home problems, and you're like, 2 weeks ago, a bomb went off about 40 meters from my tent, and I had to stop humans from dying. And you're telling me that this parking ticket, I don't care if I park, give me a ticket. I don't care. Like, you start doing like these things because you've got a completely skewed version of, you know, what problem solving is, what problems really are. It's just a wild thing how that changes your perspective, and it could be good and bad. It could be super good because then, you know, something happens in like the normal world and people are like, wow, you're really calm and thanks for talking me through this. And you're like, okay. I've had it the other way too, where I've watched teammates do something and go, bro, that was a wild thing that you just did. And they're like, what? I don't care. I'm home. It doesn't matter. It's not like we're deployed. Like, dude, that's an unhealthy way to live your life, my friend.
Yeah, man. Yeah, enough said. The hard part is turning your mind off when you come back. But the really hard part is when you're right in the middle of the set, right? So it's not like it's your last pump and you got more in front of you. So is it really? I used to think that I was calming down, or I was bringing it down from out of the red, but in reality, I never was, man. And it wasn't just me; it was all of us. We lived at that super keyed up state, which I think is why sometimes our actions in garrison, or back home stateside, might have been looked at by people that weren't in that headspace as crazy or as nuts or as I can't believe you guys did that. And we're just like, what, man? This is how we get to work. We jumped out of a plane into the water and swam underwater for 2,000 meters and landed on a spot where it's just some indiscreet spot on a beach, and then cross the beach and walked 8 miles. Who cares? Whatever. Let's go get a hamburger. I'm hungry.
Right. Yeah,
you know
what
that's easy.
That's
not easy for you.
Yeah, right. Like that's just Wednesday. We bitched about it when we got back to the team, just because we got sand in all of our stuff. Like, this wasn't a thing that raised our heart rates. It was just a thing we did. And we were like, oh, this again? Okay, fine.
There's that accidental arrogance when you're talking to people outside of the community, right?
Right.
But I mean, we all look back at those days though with a certain amount of fondness. I think we can all identify now as older guys, like, hey, this is where things went wrong in like personal life, and I had to fix this later on. But like at the time, like, you're with your boys all the time, and it's just like 100 miles an hour. All you're doing is training and deploying. Can you talk a little bit about that and the relationships that form and what that's like, just being, with that group of people during that period of time where everybody was keyed up, but like had like very much a purpose and like was very professional about what they were doing.
100%, man. You're surrounded by professionals and people that absolutely ham it up and act a fool. And even the younger kids, man, that are on team that we're probably giving a hard time to because they're younger and we're making them earn their spot. There's still that underlying respect, man, that you did the work to get here, and we'll treat you like this because you're our kid brother, but nobody else will. You're mine.
Yeah.
You are good. You are in the fold. Nobody else is going to give you a hard time. I'm going to give you a hard time because I'm going to make you hard. But the rest of these people, they will not give you a hard time. And as far as working together and what came of that, it's just meant furthering the brotherhood. And this is where I again lean on the military's brilliant in its processes sometimes. Man, it just keeps you working with this group of people to where you're just strengthening and strengthening and strengthening, and you are dropping people along that whole way. But as you're dropping people, that core group, man, is just getting stronger. The interesting thing for us on team, at least when I was going through it, it is, I think, starting to change, is we didn't really have a unilateral mission. So it didn't matter how strong we were as a team, because we knew that we were going to have to fracture and go off to other teams. And I think that's another interesting thing about the Air Force Special Operation mission set is we, at least in my tenure, we're attachments, man. That's what we did. We went out to other teams, and not only were we expected to perform, we were expected to perform and exceed what the others were doing, because we weren't just a representation of our personal selves. We were a representation of our entire career field. And if we pooched it, then our career field got a bad name.
Yep. And it's something. The pressure of that is insane. And I had the distinct pleasure of my first assignment as a PJ was at the STS. We were supporting. It used to be the SIF teams and then the CRIF teams, and I don't know what they're calling them now. They've largely been repurposed. But when you went there, it wasn't good enough that you were just the PJ. It wasn't good enough that you were just a controller. You had to go. You had to shoot. You better shoot in the top 3. You better out PT everybody at the gym. You better know every part of their job better than some of them did. And then if anything came in your lane, you better knock it out of the park. It better be a home run in front of the team. And that was the expectation. That was the standard. It was, and there were always times where somebody would go and they'd make a mistake, or maybe they didn't do as well as the PJ or the controller before them. But that was the first thing you heard when you got in the team room. Oh, I hope you're not like X. Oh, you better be, hey, this guy, he threw around in the house the last time that we were here. So I hope you're not whatever. And you would get that sort of feedback. But you were expected not to just be an enabler, not to just do that enabler mission. You were expected to be a part of the team and be a valuable member of that team in all aspects. Did you ever feel like that extra pressure made you better? That good stress, did it force you to become a better controller?
Well, it had to, man. It's a make or break type moment. Either you meet the moment or the moment makes you, meaning that when you get to a team and you have that first conversation with the top three, whoever that may be, depending on the branch you're working with, but you have your initial sit down. The way our cycles always work too, man, they suck because we didn't have the ability to go train up with the team we were actually going to go work with downrange. Right. We meet them halfway on their deployment. So they already had somebody that they've been downrange with, working with, who they already like, hopefully. Please God, tell me they like him. I have one word.
Please God, right? Please, because if they didn't like you, you weren't going into the house.
No.
If they didn't like you, you were sitting at the breach point, or you were sitting in the hip pocket of the commander, and you weren't doing the fun stuff. Yeah. Like they could literally affect your entire deployment.
So yeah, man, you came in humble. You laid out your capabilities, kind of the your rap sheet, if you will, where you've been, who you've worked with, man, just sniffing you out. But really, the true acceptance onto the team doesn't occur until you go outside the wire and you perform your duty, and you show that, hey man, I am value add to this team. That's where you start to get accepted in. Or, if you don't do well, that's where you can find yourself getting put in an arm's distance and just keeping the radios set up in the jock or something. So,
yeah. But the echoes are always really good at that, and they never want to hand that over to the Air Force guys.
No, not at all.
Yeah, but like, and not to beat this dead horse, but your personal reputation too, not just like your Kerfield reputation. It goes through that joint filter, right? Like, we are a small community, but the soft community in general is pretty small. So, like 10 years into your career, everybody that has an Army buddy that they can call that's been to where you've been. Everybody does that thing, like, where were you at this time? Like, oh, I know a guy, and everybody calls. And so like, it's kind of a weird thing that our personal reputations go through that filter. But I know that you did a lot of really radical things during your deployment phase and your team phase. So like, how upset were you when they forced you to go be an instructor?
Force is a strong word. It was politely
Air Force, not the airframes.
I diversify my portfolio of experiences outside of just the team room. I had a good long run, man. I did 15 on team. So I got to play in the sand quite a bit. I got to do my work over there. And honestly, man, I never wanted to leave, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me at the time I did leave, because I was gonna end up getting myself killed, man. I was getting I was so thirsty for going back down range and doing the job that it was coming to an unhealthy place. My family and I decided that, trying to do the instructor thing, we had been putting it off for a while. I say me, I'd been putting it off for a while because I didn't want to do it.
Yep.
And it was hard at first, man, really, because you go from being 1,000 miles an hour with your hair on fire to like this really strict curricula of these are your left and rights, these are the expectations, this is the task condition standard. Don't get emotionally tied to it, which anybody who knows me, I tend to run a little slightly skosh emotional.
All of us do. The best instructors, I hated that. I hated when people were like, okay, you have to be this objective robot and you have a curriculum and you have to do this stuff. I always resisted that. Like, I wanted my instructors. Professional subjectivity is one of the best traits that an instructor could have, because you have that experience. You have the experience of going down range and doing the things that you have. You have to be able to put part of yourself into that curriculum and find a way to make these people understand. Like, you're no kid. And I fear that there is a whole generation of people that don't know what gunfire sounds like. There's a whole generation of people that are growing up right now. There are people in the military right now that were not alive when 9/11 happened. When you and I got in, the thing that as young men, that brought us into the military, and there are people that were not alive when that happened. And that is a hard thing.
That blows me
to
away
wrap your head around.
That, but you're 100% right, man.
Yeah, it does. And I'll tell you what, unless somebody sits these folks down, you can't be as an instructor now. And I'm happy to know the instructors are doing the right thing right this second, in Kirtland Air Force Base and, San Antonio, Texas, and all these places, and, North Carolina. They're doing the right things of trying to tell these stories and trying to tell people what it was like during that time, because we don't know how they're going to have to answer the next call. How did you walk the line of being an emotional person and showing people that optic, but at the same time trying to be the best instructor that you could? How was that transition? Because for me, it was insanely tough, and I screwed everything up the first year that I was an instructor.
I think that's fair, man. My first year at dive school, I was a little bit crazy, but it started to tamp down a little bit. Wisdom, man. And the only way you get wisdom is by screwing up, and time on earth, time on this big blue marble, a couple more turns around the sun. And really what it came with is understanding you had tools in the toolbox and when you wanted to utilize them and utilizing them for the right situations. So if I had an individual, and this is, as an instructor or as an operator, as an NCO, anything, man, you need to be able to look at a situation and realize that it's not a two-dimensional plane. You have to be able to be flexible with how you deal with it. You have to understand the individuals that are inside of that situation and realize that what might work for Trent might not work for you, Aaron, or what might work for BT might not work for these guys. And you have to adapt. Now, when you're obviously addressing the whole, you have a different look because you're not addressing an individual, you're addressing the whole. But when you're breaking down and mentoring individuals, or you're taking somebody off to the side, they might be the kind of person that needs to hear, hey man, you suck, start tightening it up, or I'm going to kick your butt out of here, because that's what gets them right. But the next guy beside him, if I tell him the same thing, he might fold it up right now and walk.
Yep. Right. That's right.
And when we were at the 2-3, I would just threaten to send guys to Mike if they didn't listen to me. I'm like, you better shape up, otherwise I'm sending you over to BT, and how he's going to square you away.
I'm going to send you to your dad, and he is going to be so upset with you.
Oh man, we had a great team. We're up. Me and Siege were on red team together, and at Herbie as well, and fantastic team, man. Great dudes on that team. Had a lot of good times.
Well, so you cut your teeth at dive school. You figured out those nuances of being an instructor, and then you were given the opportunity, to finally go to the big show, as it were. There was a lot of change that was going on inside of AFSPEC War, and you were entrusted to start what we called Special Warfare Prep, which is now Special Warfare Candidate Course. But you were there, in the beginning. When you went there, what was your goal? Because we all have these personal goals, right? Like, I want to make this place better. I want to see this output. How did you feel stepping into that very undefined environment down at San Antonio?
That's a great question. So the way I looked at it, and I think this always blew people's minds, like it did at dive school when they came there, because they'd be like, hey, Big Sarge, what have you in place while you're here? And I tell them nothing. They're like, what do you mean nothing? I mean, like, I'm not trying to change anything. I'm trying to get us in a good battle rhythm doing what we do. You know what the problem in the military is we work in 2-year cycles. Why do we work in 2-year cycles? Because OICs rip on 2-year cycles. And when you get a new OIC, what do they want to do? They want to take this entire thing that you built, and this is not me bashing O's, this is just the reality. And they'll say, all right, man, I want to change this. I want to put my own stink on it, which is cool. But then you have those of us that are, your senior NCO Corps, and we're just like, sweet Jesus, we're not doing this again.
Yeah. And it's a classic sled dog for you youngins out there. It's the sled dog scenario, right? Like, the sled dog that's actually pulling the sled. Like, they're old, they're grizzled, they've got marks from the whip on them, and every 2 years the sled dog turns around and it's somebody different driving the sled, and you don't get to steer it, you just get to pull it. And every 2 years it turns over. How did you deal with those frustrations from the summer help and 2-year officers every now and again?
So, man, one disclaimer: I was extremely fortunate to work for a lot of great O's, man. Again, not going to name them because I'll forget some of them. I don't want to do that, but I had some great O's, man. Some people I still maintain, keep in touch with to today. The way you deal with it is you roll with the punches, man. As an NCO, knowing your left and your rights, knowing what your relationship with the boss is, whoever that boss may be, if it's a squadron, if it's a group, it's a wing. The way I would always handle it is I would petition for some of their time. I'd walk into their office. I'd take my rank off. This is not a suggestion for anybody else to do this, but I don't know if you have the juice.
It's a cautionary tale.
I put my rank down. I'd say, boss, we need to have a straight conversation, man. I need a BT fill in the blank talk. And we do it. And I would, if I had a problem with what we were doing, I'd protest loudly, but I'd do it privately. And then once he or she heard me out, they'd say, all right, this is my decision. And I'd walk out that door and I'd preach it like it was coming out of my own brain pan. You know what I mean? And because that's what keeps our system going, is that command team structure, man, that your officer is the one who's pushing the directives, and your job as the NCO is to enforce it, but also to keep in mind the status of the people within your organization, make sure they're being taken care of. And that's the sphere you're consulting from, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's communication, right? And I think this is one of the places where you really excel is just like on team, between the team leader, team sergeant, and up the chain, that taking that experience and putting it in a package that's palatable for that officer that may not have as much experience, guaranteed doesn't have as much experience as you do. and to help them see the light. Like I think it's easy for us sometimes to be like, this is me. Like if I think I have the right solution, I hate explaining it 800 times. You know what I mean? Like I don't like, they're like I'm like, dude, I've been doing this for this many years. Like, do you really want me to like walk you all the way down the line through the minutia to get you to make the decision? And without really realizing that sometimes they just want the data, they want to know. But I mean, that's why, you bring in Big Mike and whiteboard stuff, and then have him go communicate it to people for you. It's
well, it's why, that it sort of speaks to why instructors get burnt out too. So instructors would come to me at Kirtland. They're like, I'm so sick of it. I've had to explain myself 4 million times. I'd be like, no. You've only explained yourself to this specific team one time. You've had to do it to multiple teams, but just because you had to teach this lesson multiple times doesn't mean that it doesn't mean the world is falling down. And I had a tendency to do that, as a younger senior NCO, right? Like, senior tech sergeant, junior, master sergeant. There were a lot of times where I'd look at my officer and be like, listen, man, this is the answer that you want. Can we just get there? Like, because I was burnt out of mentoring and walking them through. That wasn't the same captain I explained this to last time. This wasn't the same major that I explained it to last time. Like, they deserve you being able to calmly walk them through the process, give them the data, like you said, and say, hey, this is where we need to go, because you're investing in that person for the next time, so that they can see the scenario like you do the next time. And you're giving them that investment to be a better leader with your experience, because that's what you're supposed to do.
No, I think you're 100% right, man. I think to be a good instructor, to be a good operator, to be really good in this field, you need to be a good actor. You need to be able to, you do your thing, whatever that thing is. If it's a training evolution, if it's a deployment, or if it's a stint with a team, and you're gonna have another team 3 days after this team leaves in training, you play your part for that team. But when the next team comes in, it resets. So I might be on a really good clip with this cohort, and we love each other, and it's great. And I think these are all like my little brothers, and I can't wait for them to be so successful. I'm so proud. But this next team comes in, they don't get that, man, because they haven't been there for 8.5 weeks earning that level of congeniality. Now you're getting more stern, because that's what you need, because you're going to earn everything you get here, and you just reset, man, and you continue to do that.
Yeah. So let's talk about SWCC a little bit. You go to SWCC, and I want to talk about the candidates. What was surprising about the candidates? Like, during your time there, can you talk about like some of the positives and negatives you saw about, like the current, slightly not current generation that was going through, and some surprising things about that, and what you think the most important things that they got out of the candidate course were, whether it was a physical or the mentorship or anything like that.
Sure. Okay, to start off with, what's different about these guys and I'll just compare them to my generation, because that's what's easier for me to compare to. I would say there's a different level of physicality. I would say they tended to be a little bit smaller, and I'm not saying this jokingly. Their bone density is lower. That's just a real thing. Anybody that listens to this,
less
please
testosterone.
take your ass outside and get some sun, drink some milk. Mm-hmm. If you're lactose intolerant, get some vitamin D subs.
Something.
Because, man, like, musculoskeletal injuries, bone stress injuries were a problem. I would say like epidemic level problem, where we were just breaking these kids, man. And that was even after they were coming through a solid preparatory before they came to us, because there's different mechanisms in place. It's hard to out train 18 to 24 years, which is our primary demographic of bad choices, in 6 months, man. It's difficult to get there.
Yeah. I think that we've talked about this before. That's why, like, in the beginning, when we'd get questions from like 13, 14-year-olds, we're like, man, just go live your life. Don't worry about this now. And now we're kind of like, hey, like, dude, these are the things, like, get outside, run around, fall out of a tree, play sports, anything that you can do.
Yeah. I will say the goods, man. The goods are, these kids are, man, their ability to retain knowledge is insane. Their ability to take in so much data and do things with that, I would say was better than our generations. But they're also getting stuff thrown at them in a lot different manner. All of us walk around with this little guy right here, right, which is basically the NASA 1968 command center in our pocket, man. You have access to basically any knowledge you could ever want to have, which is a great tool. Or it could be straight up cancer for your brain, because you just look at nonsense that shortens your memory span to about a minute, because all TikToks are about a minute long. Yeah, man. So a little bit different physicality. That's not to say there's not some absolute sled dogs, because there was. Man, really smart, very cerebrally. I think a little bit better, different possibly than our generation. But ultimately, man, it's a lot of the same. Man, you had young guys, young gals who, man, are just trying to figure out what the hell they're doing. Man, they're hearing about this kind of the same way most of us did. It's not like Air Force Special Operations is widely known. So you kind of come into it with not a whole lot of preconceived expectations. I will say there's more information on it now than there used to be. But then you kind of come into it saying, man, I just want to see what this is all about. And the way our pipeline's set up, I think it's a pretty good crawl, walk, run now for getting these folks to where they need to be.
Yeah. We just had the Special Warfare Candidate course, a lot of their coaching staff on, and they're even backing this up. You talked about being able to out-train, a lifetime of bad decisions. That's a fantastic way to put it. They've actually seen this, and then what they did is they came up with a pre-accession 20-week program. So even before you get to basic training, they're trying to back that timeline up to get the candidates, more and more prepared. And, to be quite frank with you, like you and the cohort of instructors that started the prep program, you guys laid the groundwork for all that stuff because you highlighted these problems, these things you're talking about. And, it's just, that's all it is problems. We're not saying that there's anything wrong, but you're the one that was like, hey, listen, every single person at the age of 18 right now has 40% less free testosterone running around their system than the people that are 20 years older.
Just
than
objective
that's
fact,
just
man.
a fact. That's it. You spend way less time on your feet. We're finding that spending time on your feet is a huge indicator of success in A&S. And you were some of the people that made a highlight of those things and said, hey, we're having musculoskeletal injuries. We're having these things because it's just a different generation. That was an awesome thing that you guys set up at SWCC. As you look at the special operations environment and with your history of stuff, what would you want candidates really to focus on or really to understand before they get in? Because we're going to ask you for your advice to get through the pipeline and stuff, but considering all the time you spent downrange, considering the geopolitical environment that we're in and near peer threats and stuff, what is one of those things that you would want people to focus on to keep their head level in this time? Because it's easy to get distracted by TikTok. It's easy to get distracted by this phone in your pocket. And that was a great example of how that could take away your attention. But what would you want people, no kidding, to hone in on and to help them find essentially their why?
The why. Oh, I love this question. I used to make kids write essays on the why all the time. I'll tell you, man, I think the why is an apparition. I think that it's going to be different for every individual. It's impossible to key on to, this is the universal why, or this is the underlying top 3 why for everybody. And it's just not. Some of the people coming through their why is going to be, man, they want a sexy job and they think it sounds cool. Some of the people, they think they'll look good in a beret. Some of the people think it sounds cool to jump out of airplanes and they want to go try that. Some of the people watch your guys' podcast and they're like, man, these guys seem awesome. It seems like a really fun job. I'd love to give that a try. I think the ones who are going to be successful, man, and this is just my bias coming through, so this is BT's opinion. The ones who are going to be successful are the ones who don't look at it like a job. They don't care about any of the things that I just mentioned. And, man, their sole desire is to fight for and defend this country and wanting to be in an organization where they could be at the absolute forefront of getting that done. And they want to serve with the best people this country has to offer, regardless of the branch you're working with, man. People that took the same oath you did, people that are crawling through the same mud you are, that you would die for and that would die for you, man. That feeling to me is the why. If you can get to that why, man, I'm doing this because my life depends on it. My family's life depends on it. I'm the shield for this country. You're going to be successful because you have all the tools around you now in this modern pipeline to help you be successful. You show that level of drive and you say, I'm here, and the only way I'm leaving is if you drag me off. Those instructors are going to say, okay, we'll get you there. Because that's what we need, man. We need that mindset. I can work with somebody who doesn't have all the physical attributes or has some problems. If they have that mindset, then I'll work my butt off to get you where you can be successful. And so will every other instructor.
Yep. All it takes is all you've got, as long as you're willing to give it. So perfect. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Obviously, I would love to sit around with you for like 6 hours and tell fun war stories about the time that we almost starved to death in the jungle, but we don't have time for that today. And so everybody out there, appreciate you listening. Mike, appreciate you coming on, man. You know how I feel about you.
Love you, boys. I appreciate it. This is awesome.
All right, everybody out there, like, subscribe. We'll catch you later, and train hard.